fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream. Good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the land on which this meeting is being held and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. We have apologies from Mr Sadler, Mr Singh and Ms Slattery. Do we have any further apologies? I take that as a no. We'll do the declaration of conflict. Declaration of prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and or comment on other councillors and or staff interests in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Councillors, are there any conflicts to declare? Councillor Millwood.
Through the Chair, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest in item 4.1 in that I am related to the applicant, and I hereby ask my fellow councillors if I may remain in the room or if I am required to leave the room.
How closely are you related, Councillor Millwood?
He's my cousin.
Well, councillors, my view is that Councillor Millwood should stay in the room. How do you feel?
Second that.
Looks like it's unanimous.
Well, just one. It's not that you have dinner with your cousin.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So it's resolved that you can stay.
Thanks
you for that, Councillor Millwood. Any other conflicts to declare?
Yeah, and through you, Mr Chairman, I can confirm that Councillor Millwood has advised me in writing of that potential conflict in accordance with the legislation.
Thanks, Mr CEO. I now suspend standing orders and refer to the CEO has some exciting news to announce.
Through you, Mr Chairman, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the suspension to standing orders. Mr Chairman, I understand that you will be making an entirely consequential announcement in general business. As you're aware, you and I met yesterday with senior personnel from various state government departments and Mr Nick DeMetto, the member for Hinchinbrook. Through you, Mr Chairman, when you make your announcement, I believe that anyone who has had a notion that council has not worked diligently, robustly and energetically towards a solution for the various issues which have vexed us for some time in Port Hinchinbrook, I believe that anybody who has had that notion will be disabused of that thought immediately upon hearing your words. And I look forward equally to hearing your words. It was quite an extraordinary outcome from a very serious meeting. It was a meeting which was conducted without prejudice and in principle, and it's important for me to mention that the meeting was predicated on information expressed through the state government from the federal government, which has not yet been reduced to writing. So the transparency in respect of this is absolute. We're dealing with something which has so much urgency attached to it that we're not going through the usual procedures whereby we'd be exchanging letters and having our legal representatives dealing with negotiations. It's been directly done as of yesterday, and I look forward to hearing your words this afternoon, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr CEO. And I just want to clarify that the statement that I'll read out has been prepared by the Department of State Development. Queensland Treasury were in the room as well. The outcome the bureaucrats were seeking was an in-principle agreement. After we heard what they had to present, we struck that agreement. And there's an aggressive plan going forward from today to deliver an outcome within 30 days. So it's really exciting news. We can't talk about the detail, and as I said again, what I read out was not prepared by me or the CEO. It was prepared by the two State Department and Queensland Treasury who called the meeting in Cairns yesterday. Okay, we go back to the agenda and confirmation of the minutes. 1.1, page 2, the minutes of the meeting on the 24th of June 2021. Would somebody move that they are a true and accurate record? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. 1.2, page 31. the special budget meeting 2021-2022. Somebody move that true and accurate record. Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Tui. All in favour? Carried unanimously. 1.3, page 44. Special local government meeting dated the 25th of June 2021. Somebody move true and accurate record. Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move on to business arising. Councillors, is any business arising from any of those three sets of minutes? Councillor Tui.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning through the chair. I just in relation to some of the conferences that we were given our leave for, I believe a couple of those have been postponed due to COVID. If anybody would like to comment on that, I think Councillor Baines and Councillor Millwood were to be in attendance, so I just thought I'd ask. Thank you.
Councillor
Yeah,
Millwood.
so through the chair, the Australian Women in Local Government meeting that I had been okayed to go to at Airlie Beach has now been postponed till sometime in 2022 due to COVID. Thank you.
Mr. CEO, Councillor Baines.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. So further to that, the council leaders conference that was ready to happen in August has also been postponed. So it hasn't been put off, and as soon as a date is set, especially during this time of the pandemic uplift, there'll be another date sent out, and I would like to express my intention to still attend on your behalf, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Section in 2.1, the sale of blocks of land in Tully. I'd just like to let everyone know that there's been a frenzy in the purchase of those, and it's great to see people wishing to spend so much money in our region. It's a great look. Moving on then to 8.1. Turn the pages. No, not 8.1. 8.12. Well, it's the crocodiles, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to get back to there. We've had a dog taken at the Vipianus Drive in Tully Heads. There's the crocodile issue, which I've been brought up on many occasions, and I know that Councillor Baines has taken this on as a personal project, and I'll just ask him for a update on where he is with that.
Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Barnes, for your question. We have been doing a bit of work in that space, Councillor Barnes, and I do have the pleasure to announce that there is a Crocwise round table being held in Cairns on Thursday the 22nd of July. There'll be representatives from Queensland Government, from all the various departments who will help us deal in that space, including DES, Parks and Wildlife Service. So there are key topics that are going to be discussed at this Queensland Wildlife App. We also have a lot of the tourism operators attend. So the key discussion points around the table will be the newly launched Queensland Wildlife crocodile reporting app, which has gone live, and I've encouraged people before to please download the Queensland Wildlife app, and that helps supply real-time information directly to the departments, and residents can also have a look on the mapping and see what's been going on. There is a review of the 3-year crocodile monitoring program that has been running for the last 3 years on numbers, so we'll be going through that data. It was done in the same processes as were done in 1985 to keep the same baseline in their, I can't think of the word for that one, Mr. CEO. They used the same method as previously to keep that in place, but there's a lot of discussion around the new technology and new initiatives that may be used. There'll be a lot of discussion around the new Crocwise public safety initiatives. There's some new signage coming forward. Again, a direct link to the Q Wildlife app And there is a review going on at the moment as well of the crocodile management plan, which was first put in place in 2017, I believe. I could be corrected on that, 16 or 17. So I would put a request out, Mr. Mayor, to the community, if they have some issues or some stories and they'd like me to bring them up at this Crocwise round table. It would be a great opportunity for the community to get in contact with me through council, and it gives me issues to speak to. We'll have many ministers there and state representatives, as well as the DGs and all the departmental representatives. So I hope that answers your question, Councillor Barnes.
You've done exceptionally well. Again, Mr. Mayor, could I just speak also on a point 8.1, asset rationalisation? The CEO gets sick of me mentioning the name depreciation, and he's rattled me a few times, but I think I've got him this time, Mr. Mayor. I've done research from the, it's a document from Queensland Treasury, and I don't think they tell stories. It says here that why is depreciation really used? Depreciation expense is not a cash expense. It is an accounting treatment to represent the value of an asset consumed during the period. And it says here that depreciation expense is an essential component in outstanding the full cost of the services your council provides. However, it does not determine what you charge users for a particular service, meaning, as I've been saying, and I'll say it again, you don't charge depreciation on something that you're not going to rebuild. I've got a few more articles here, Mr. Mayor. I'll be trying to educate the CEO before he retires. He'll leave a very smart man, he will. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, would you like the full response to that now?
I think the CEO has the right to reply.
Mr. Chairman, the situation is this. From 1936 until 91 or 92, the councils in Queensland used what was referred to as a cash accounting system. That is to say that depreciation was not dealt with the way that it is dealt with now. In 1988, from memory, it might have been 89, ED 42, Exposure Draft 42, was introduced, which provided a framework which would later determine the way that local authorities deal with depreciation. That was followed by Australian Accounting Standard 27 at the time, AAS 27, which was entrapped in the new Local Government Act as it was then in 92. There was a vigorous debate from 88 through to 92. Many people within local government believed that depreciation should be dealt with by local governments the way that it is dealt with by everybody else. That is not the case. There are particular standards for application of depreciation in local government. Roads is a very obvious example where council can neither open nor close a road. Council does not own a road, and council cannot derive an income from a road. Under normal circumstances, it would therefore fall outside the scope of asset definition. To continue, depreciation is an expense which must be applied. It's true that an individual club or a group does not have to have depreciation charged to it for the use of a facility, but that would require that the rest of the ratepayers would be paying for that depreciation in a nutshell. If depreciation is not funded, then it affects council's equity. It therefore goes on to affect council's sustainability registers, and in a nutshell, not the sustainability registers, sustainability ratios, and in a nutshell, the way that this council has been dealing with depreciation has survived 13 audits now. We've had 13 unmodified audits in a row. Were we not to deal with depreciation in the manner we use, then I have absolutely no doubt that the Auditor General would be alerted very quickly and alive to that issue. And on that note, I note that there, and I hope I'm not insulting anybody, I note that there is one qualified accountant in the room. Is anybody else a qualified accountant? I have one qualified accountant in the room, Ms. Bradley, who, with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I'll invite to make further comments.
One of a kind.
Now, Councillor Barnes, Miss Bradley's going to step you through this. Please take note.
I think you're getting a glass of water.
He's getting some water. He missed it.
Well, I think, Barry, with your comments you've made, the understanding of the why for what depreciation is seems to be explained, and commend you on your research and obtaining that QTC document, which was going to be my recommendation to send to all councillors, because it is quite valuable and informs the non-accountants of the world what depreciation is and why it's used and applied according to accounting standards. So I guess a couple of key things to understand with depreciation is we've got legislative requirements as well as council policy, which explains the why we have depreciation, why it exists. We also have the what, which comes to what's an asset, what is depreciation, as well as the audit scrutiny, which is our assurance around depreciation. So from a legislative perspective, we are regulated under Local Government Act and the Local Government Regulations to prepare general purpose financial statements. So those general purpose financial statements must be in line with the Australian accounting standards, and it's the Australian accounting standards which dictates that depreciation must be recorded and assets must be depreciated. So the objective of those general purpose financial statements is to provide information to primary users of those reports to support decision making. So that's the bare essentials of what our financial statements purpose is. So the role of the Australian Accounting Standard Board sets rules over the form and content of those statements, including the accounting treatment and the disclosure for particular types of transactions, including depreciation, which is in question currently. So those requirements, together with the opinion of our external auditor, provide a mechanism to ensure compatibility and consistency across financial statements throughout Australia and the world with the international financial reporting statements. So the range of different accounting standards is issued by the Australian Accounting Standard Board, and these standards are the basis for the international accounting standards and the international financial reporting standards, so it's consistent across the world. So there's a number of accounting standards which James referred to, a number of those which I won't bore you with. A lot of them are not relevant to you. So in addition to that, Council has adopted an asset accounting policy. So this policy outlines the mandatory asset management accounting requirements in accordance with the Act and regulations that we just spoke about. It also provides guidance, clarity and consistency regarding the treatment of our capital expenditure, depreciation, revaluations, impairment and disposals of our assets. This policy was adopted by Council on the 11th of March in 2021. Prior to its first adoption in February 2020, it was also reviewed by Council's external auditors for reasonableness, and was also reviewed by both the Asset Management Working Group as well as the Audit Committee to ensure we have covered everything that we need to be covering in that. So what is an asset? So an asset is defined as a resource controlled by an entity as a result of past events and from which future economic benefits are expected to flow to an entity. So effectively, the key requirements for an asset relates to control, so the potential to receive a benefit or restrict a benefit or access to a benefit from the community. A future economic benefit, which is the probability that economic benefits or service potential will flow to council. Also, whether it can be measured reliably, also as a criteria of asset, and physical substance if it's part of an asset network, etc. So as you referred to the QTC document, depreciation is the systematic allocation of a depreciable amount of an asset over its useful life, which reflects the pattern in which the asset's future economic benefits are expected to be consumed by the entity. So depreciation was first introduced in 91, as Mr. Gott mentioned earlier. Depreciation expense provides an estimate of the amount of future economic benefit consumed during the year. So the depreciation method used to determine the amount of depreciation also must match the expected patterns of consumption. So in some assets where, for example, a piece of machinery that might be able to produce 1 million units of fluff, say, the depreciation method for a machine of that kind might be based on the unit method, so the volume of units being processed by the machine. However, majority of councils, well, we use straight line depreciation across the useful life. So the depreciation method must also be based on relevant factors with evidence of remaining service potential, taking into account utilisation, wear and tear of the asset and obsolescence. And council must depreciate only the depreciable amount, which means that if an asset has any residual value, so if we could sell it at the end of its life and retain, for example, a vehicle, we could sell it and get, say, 10 grand back for that vehicle, then we don't depreciate that 10,000. That's the residual value. We also must depreciate the depreciable amount in a systematic way over the useful life, and it must commence once that asset's ready for use, so once it can be utilised in whatever way that is, depending on the asset type. So the purpose of depreciation records the value or cost of the asset that has been consumed during the accounting period, which is our financial year, so that users of general purpose financial statements can discern information about council's assets and our performance of our assets. So the purpose is solely that of a key performance indicator in our financial statements and is not intended for any other purpose. Some entities have attempted to use depreciation for the purposes other than measuring the value of that asset consumed during the year, for example, as a measure of the amount of future funding required to replace an existing asset, or as a mechanism for setting user charges or rates based on fully funded depreciation. However, there's no direct link or relationship under the accounting standards between depreciation and either future funding needs or as a rate setting mechanism. Any linkage is determined by council's policies, historical practices, and the requirements to meet financial sustainability measures. As council has a history and potential future of delivering balanced budgets, that is why we generally have a balanced budget and fund depreciation. So council's asset management plans are the tool that we have in place to determine our future funding requirements for our asset renewal program. So that is our key driver. So a bit of benchmarking for asset intensive entities like local governments. The fair value, which is the sale price of land or some buildings, and we also use current replacement costs, how much it would cost to replace an asset, of that non-current asset is typically around 95% of our balance sheet. And depreciation expense is often reported in ranges between 15 to 40% of total expenses. I think ours is sitting around 32%, give or take. So that's across all local government entities. So as council aims to produce a small operating profit, the impact of misstatement of depreciation expense of the bottom line is highly material. So that means that if we didn't apply it properly, we could either have a significant surplus or a significant deficit. And given the subjective nature of the calculations, it poses an extreme audit risk, as you can understand, based on 95% of our balance sheet. So in our local government regulations, it states that council's financial statements must be audited annually, and the auditor must obtain reasonable assurance as to whether our statements are free from material misstatement. So the auditor is required to issue an opinion that the statements materially comply with the accounting standards and present fairly the financial performance of council. To do this, the auditor conducts a number of tests and gathers sufficient evidence that fair value and depreciation expense and disclosures have been prepared in accordance with the accounting standards and supported by appropriate evidence and are materially correct. Inability to provide sufficient and appropriate audit evidence to support that valuation would normally result in the auditors issuing a modified audit opinion, which effectively means that the application and processes and methodologies do not satisfy the requirements for accounting standards, and there's material incorrect transactions in council's financial statements. So to date, as James mentioned earlier, council has had 13 consecutive unmodified audit opinions, providing assurance to councillors and the community of council's compliance with the Australian accounting standards, council's policy, and therefore applying the correct treatment of our depreciation. We do have some opportunities in this space which council are obviously exploring at the moment, which is reducing our asset base as part of our asset rationalisation. We've got opportunities around reviewing maintenance programs to ensure maximum useful lives of our assets are obtained, doing a cost-benefit analysis on the maintenance programs versus extending the remaining useful life and updating that remaining useful life in our asset register. We've got opportunities around undertaking regular detailed reviews of our remaining useful life to ensure an accurate representation in the register. Assessment of economic or functional obsolescence on particular assets, which we've undertaken, as you're all aware of, with our sewage treatment plant, with Perry Harvey Jetty, etc., have been areas that council's been exploring. But however, we could explore that further. There may be a number of assets out there that could come under that same approach. And also opportunities around increasing the volume of condition assessments or asset inspections to have a further refined approach to our maintenance programs. This could identify further opportunity for changes in fair value or lower condition assets and remaining useful life extension. So the key takeaways: depreciation is an expense that must be recognised under our Australian accounting standards and legislation, and is an estimate of the amount of future economic benefit consumed during the year. Depreciation is not a funding source for future asset renewal needs and is not related to a decision about whether to renew an asset at the end of its life. This is what our asset management plans and our long-term financial plans are for. Depreciation is used to calculate 2 of 3 of our legislated financial sustainability measures stated under local government regulations. Our financial statements provide information for decision making, so around accurate depreciation reflects council's sustainability. It advises whether revenue is covering costs, including using up council's assets, which is your depreciation. Provides evidence of council's ability to sustain current levels of infrastructure. And the impacts include that accurate depreciation affects our financial statements, it affects council's external audit opinion, and also asset management plans are in place to determine future renewal funding requirements. That's all from my soapbox.
Mr. Mayor,
Sorry.
you remind me never argue with her. Secondly, I appreciate your very educated response. I just don't, as a council, I'd hate to see us get to the situation where our non-profit or sporting bodies can't play a sport or have meetings because they can't afford rent. You know, I know it's all nice and that's the rules and they're the rules, but I've still got a little bit more to teach our CEO when I get later on. But yeah, I'd hate to get that situation where we've got clubs folding because they can't meet our requirements. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Millwood.
So through the chair, so Ms Bradley, I just, if we were incorrectly using the depreciation, this would quickly be brought to our attention by the audit office, I would think. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Ms Bradley? I just want to summarise that, Councillor Barnes, that was a TKO in the first round, and your challenge to the CEO should be reconsidered.
I think she's been waiting 3 months for me to ask that question.
Thank you, Ms Bradley.
Not a problem.
Do you want to write a reply?
No. But through you, Mr. Chairman, I thank the Deputy Mayor for his sagacious and erudite comments, and I do continue to learn from him. Not in respect of depreciation, however. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I have a number of business arising matters, sure. If I may. These are responses to matters that were taken on notice at the last meeting. So the first one is 8.1, the one that Councillor Barnes just addressed in respect to the Tully Caravan Park. Councillors will have seen, I hope, an email sent on the 24th of June which addressed the comments made at the council meeting. The works in the Tully Caravan Park are in accordance with the master plan that was circulated in 2020. So that's where it was ventilated to council originally. Second one at 8.2, I think that had to do with the new eating space. Yes, the new eating spaces. That was part of the open space renewal program, not part of the asset rationalisation program, which is facilities based. In respect of 8.5, in-kind support, our colleague Ms. Saffron will schedule media release when the new guidelines are finalised. The footpath at Fitzgerald Esplanade, there's an expectation of completion at the end of this month, weather permitting. And in respect of 8.11, explaining or further ventilating how depreciation works, that's something that is with the comms team at the moment to put out for greater understanding of the public to be achieved. So that's all of mine, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Any further business arising from those 3 sets of minutes? Okay, we've had a mover and a seconder for those, so we now move on to item 3, community and culture, 3.1, page 48, Freedom of the Town, Innisfail, 3rd Combat Service Support Battalion, and the CEO will present this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. Through you, Mr. Chairman, 2006, 3rd Combat Service Support Battalion assisted Innisfail in the clean-up after Cyclone Larry. The battalion was under the command at that time of Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Bottrell. As a result of that experience, the men and women of the 3rd bonded with families in the region, a bond that was confirmed at the 2006 Anzac Day March and Ceremony, and was cemented when the Mayor at that time, then Councillor Clark, granted the battalion freedom of entry to the Shire of Johnson in September 2006. This freedom of entry was first exercised on 28th of October by a march through the city led by Lieutenant Bottrell. Through Mr. Chairman, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Young is now in command of the 3rd and has asked Cassary Coast Regional Council as the successor of the Shire of Johnson and indeed Cardwell Shire, if it would be willing to grant the 3rd the honour of commemorating the original freedom of entry, 5th of September 2021. This day is the battalion's 30th birthday, and it also marks 15 years since Cyclone Larry and the original parade. In addition, the 3rd Combat Service Support Battalion has recently been granted theatre honours for their efforts in East Timor and Iraq. These need to be formally presented to the battalion, and Lieutenant Colonel Young can think of no better place to do this than the community so linked to their history. It's my recommendation, therefore, with your indulgence, Mr. Mayor, that Cassary Coast Regional Council extend freedom of the town of Innisfail to the commanding officers and soldiers of the 3rd Combat Support Battalion.
Thank you, Mr. Gott. Any questions or comment for the CEO? Councillor Chewy.
Maybe I'm hearing things, Mr. Gott, but I read 5th of December and I thought you said September. I could be wrong.
If I said September, I apologise. I meant to say December.
Thank you. I could be wrong. That's what I thought I heard.
He does make mistakes.
Okay, Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the comment was the September when it was issued back in 2006. They're coming back in December this year. Mr. Mayor, I've had a phone conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Young. The battalion is very proud of the works that they did in Innisfail post-Cyclone Larry. I don't think Defence can give them a battle honour for it, but I think it would be maybe it's appropriate for us to do so. I'm not sure, but I think it's a great opportunity for us to once again recognise the significant efforts that all of our Defence Force personnel put towards our country It's a great way for us to say, I know they're not happy in this country where the Americans thank them for their service. Australians are a bit more quiet achievers than that and don't find that very palatable a lot of the time. But I think this is a great opportunity for us to bring the servicemen back now who weren't probably with the battalion at the time, and then they can keep this long-running relationship with our area, and they will continue to do. It's an excellent space for us to be in. I know there's going to be a lot of to-do and pomp and ceremony, so I would encourage everybody when they turn up and they're marching through the streets on the 5th of December, come along and bring your flags. Mr. Mayor yesterday signified the last troops from Afghanistan being removed from, last Australian troops from Afghanistan being removed from that theatre after 20 years of operations. So it's a very poignant time, and again, I believe anyone who wears a Defence Force uniform in our nation ought to receive our highest commendations and thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further comments or questions for the CEO? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 4, Planning Services, 4.1, page 51, application for reduction in infrastructure charges relating to an MCU. And Mr. Jones will present this report.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Mr. Jones.
Through the Chair, Council is in receipt of a request from Mr Paul Zonta for a 100% reduction in the infrastructure charges relating to a material change of use for a medium impact industry and warehouses being a shed and offices situated at 9 Shepherd Close, Mission Beach. The application was approved by Council subject to conditions on the 13th of May 2021 with infrastructure charges for the amount of $8,516.25. The proposed development is on land within the township zone, Greater Mission Beach Industry Precinct, and meets the eligibility criteria outlined within the policy. It is recommended that the request for 100% reduction in infrastructure charges be approved by Council, provided the development is completed prior to the 18th of June 2024. Happy to answer any questions, Council.
Councillor Chewy.
Mr Jones, good morning. This is an ongoing one for me. I understand the charges issue. I just still have issues with existing businesses in that area that have not followed through with their landscaping and beautification of their premises. Can we have an update on that? And I just feel that, you know, there needs to be a further beyond just, you know, they need to follow all their recommendations through before they receive any reduction, because the place that I'm talking about is an entry to Mission Beach, and it's just not, they have not lived up to what I believe they agreed to do, and we are getting commentary quite regularly about it. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Through the Chair, Councillor Chewy will continue to chase up that issue. We know it's a hot topic at Mission Beach, and we have commenced some enforcement action with the landholder in that case, so we'll continue to chase that up. And hopefully I'll be able to give you some better news at a further meeting. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Jones? If not, does somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Councillors, we now move on to item 5, general business. We'll go through the normal general business, and at the end, the piece about yesterday's meeting with the Department of State Development and Queensland Treasury. The CEO desire is to go into a confidential session in general business, so you get a full briefing on the details that we're not allowed to make public. We will then come out of the confidential, and the prepared statement from the Department of State Development will be read out by myself. So a little bit unusual, I know, and then we've still got a confidential session later in the day, but it is required because the details of yesterday's meeting remain confidential to the general public, and the CEO wants to share that with you in a private session. So I'll leave that to the very last item in general business. Any general business? Councillor Chewy.
Just two things. I'd just like to take the opportunity to congratulate everybody who turned out in yesterday's march for NAIDOC. It wasn't, the weather conditions were not on our side, but it was still a great crowd, and congratulations to those that marched and the people that made the effort in the park to create activities and everything. It was great to see, and yeah, it was great. And once again, Mr. CEO, there are issues on Facebook land that our meetings are not open to the public. Could you please again make it clear that we are accepting people to come and join our meetings, but there is a process and a protocol that they must go through? If you could please explain again. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Councillor Chewy. Yes, I give you my absolute assurance that the meetings are open to the public and have been for some time now, which has been widely published through our website. We do have a restriction because of COVID, just as any other meeting, wedding party, funeral, anything has restrictions as to numbers, and we must abide with those restrictions as to numbers. In this particular space, we calculate that there's room for about 4 attendees. The process to pre-register is available through the website, and we have actually had a few pre-registrations. However, those people decided for whatever reason not to attend at the last moment. So if someone pre-registered for the next meeting, they'll be installed into a seat at the back of the room, appropriately physically distanced, and can be in the meeting room. I hasten to add, Councillor Chewy, that the attendance at council meetings typically is overwhelmed exponentially by the viewing of our live streaming. So I think it's quite convenient for people to sit at home and live stream it at any time, rather than needing to physically attend. Notwithstanding that, they can.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification that they can. Whether
Yes.
they choose to or not is entirely up to the people, but that they can. Thank you.
Councillor Chewy, I appreciate you bringing the matter up, because fake news on social media is saying that we're the only council in Queensland is shutting the public out. No transparency, corruption, etc., etc. So I thank you for the question. It's made very clear by the CEO that our meetings are open. We didn't create COVID. The guidelines under Queensland Health are there for everybody to follow and obey, and we're simply doing that. This chamber has been measured by our staff, and it was determined that a maximum of 4 could show up. Since we've opened the meetings up, we've had 1 resident attend in person. Clearly, most people are happy with the live streaming. Any other general business? Councillor Barnes.
Just very quickly, Mr. Mayor, just like to let the public know that the contractor has started the Owen Street job. For those who are unaware of Owen Street, that's the street in Innisfail between Coles and Anzac Park. The councillors...
That's Ernest Street, mate. It's Ernest Street.
Ernest Street, I'm sorry, yeah, Bainesy. Ernest Street is between Anzac Park and Coles. With council's very aware that it has to be done under as quick a time as possible, and they started on Monday, and guess what happened Monday? It started the rain. So we've got them on a time limit, subject to rain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair, I've got a couple of concerns within our community. Can someone please explain how assets that have been built via grant funding and such all become assets of council, as I've had many questions in relation to buildings that have been built with prior grants, and why are they now owned by council, is my first question.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, it's a condition of the grant funding. The state and the federal government do not build facilities and own and operate them. They produce grants to councils, and if councils take those grants, then a condition of accepting the grant is that the council accepts the asset. It's inevitable, and it's always been that way.
Mr. Goodman.
Mr. Goodman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only thing, if I could add to that, is if those structures or those that infrastructure that's been built is built on council land, that is the determining factor. Unless we have a formal lease which provides the ownership of those that infrastructure to that club. So if those things are not in place, the standards require that those are assets of council and that we handle those appropriately with the relevant accounting standards.
Thank you. And I've got a few more you might want to stay, Mr Goodman. The other question is, will we have plumbers, etc. on call for our showtime in Tully to assure that the grandstand runs up to its expectations and without disaster, as the community is very concerned about the new facility toilets being able to cope?
Short answer is yes, plumbers will be on call.
Okay, thank you. And there's one more that the community's also brought to my attention about the rationalisation of the igloo, and have asked of the possibility of it to be put on a heritage list. Thank you.
I can, through the chair, I can just say that it is not heritage listed, but if the community, it's not a proposal of council, either of staff or as yet, I'm yet to hear from councillors of a strategy to have it heritage listed. But I'm certainly not an expert on the heritage process, but I understand it does not require that council nominate a structure or a building to be heritage listed. If there is anybody in the community that wants to go through that process, that is open to them to go through that process.
Councillor Chewy.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor. Mr Goodman, following on from Councillor Millward's, that would, with your knowledge that you may or may not have, would the igloo be likely to be a candidate for heritage listing? Do you know the criteria at all? Or Mr Gott?
Yeah, through you, Mr Chairman, it's not a local government process. That's determined by the Heritage Council. It's a state function. The heritage buildings legislation provides for a register of buildings which are heritage listed. I'm not in a position to give you the full criteria, but I can comment that generally speaking, buildings which are considered to have, not considered by council, but considered by the determining body, to have significant historical, and they define between historical and historic, historical and or historic significance are potentially candidates. Whether that would be the case with this igloo or not, would not be for me to determine, and I don't know.
Thank you, and it's a good point, Councillor Millward. So the community could in fact run with this if they felt passionate enough?
Oh, and through you, Mr Chairman, an individual can make application.
Thank you, thank you.
Just a comment on the Heritage Council. They did visit our region about 4 or 5 years ago. They met with community groups, they met with councillors, they met with our staff, and they drew up a list of buildings that they deemed needed to be protected. For example, Mears Training and Construction, the old Church of England church in South Johnson, that was branded with the heritage blessing. Ron and Dan's Butcher Shop in Ernest Street, they pushed back hard against it, and I don't think it went ahead, but certainly that was identified as a heritage listed building. But they were very active in our community, and it's interesting that they didn't say the igloo should be on that list of theirs. They didn't put the igloo on their list. But that doesn't mean a community group shouldn't knock on that door and try it. So great idea, Councillor Millward, but let them do the legwork. It's not a council role. Any further, gentlemen? Councillor Pervin.
Yes, thanks, Mr Chair. Mr Goodman, before you go anywhere. All right, look, I just want to ask Mr Goodman, I've noticed, and I spoke at council meeting some time ago about our wayfinding signs, and Mr Goodman said that they had arrived. When will they be constructed, Mr Goodman? I thought we had an answer on that last time. We're waiting for the contractors. Can you please give me an update? Otherwise, can we get into doing them ourselves?
Through the chair, Councillor Pervin, the last update we had from the sorry, apologies for that. I'll go through that again through the chair. Councillor Pervin, the last update we received from Armsign was on the 25th of June. They did provide at that time an updated timeline outlining the works provided, and the timeline should have concrete footings for the new signs completed next week. Obviously, there has been some weather conditions that would be impeding that work currently. The time frame that was provided on 25th of June had completion of the project in the week of 9th of August. And within that program, they had allowed 2 weeks of contingency for wet weather. So we will continue to monitor the progress of Armsign and delivering the project in accordance with their updated program of works. The week of 9th of August is the current program for completion.
Councillor Chewy.
Thank you for raising that, Councillor Purvitt. Mr Goodman, I attended a local meeting and members of the community were quite keen once I have spoken to Mr Jones about this, just wanted to share it with everybody. Members of the community were keen to add beautification, like gardening and stuff, once the signs were installed, obviously in keeping with council plans. And Mr Jones advised it would be a TMR thing, but is it possible for the community to work with gardening to make the entryways to our towns better?
It is possible, Councillor Chewy. One of the things to keep in mind, though, is ongoing maintenance of gardens. One of the things we have seen at some stages in the past in some areas is a few groups get together with the best of intentions and create gardens or create something that is about promoting an attractive entrance to a township, and then stop maintaining it, and it can become unsightly or reflect badly or reflect poorly on the community if there are sorts of community initiatives that don't have ongoing commitment to maintenance of them. But yes, the short answer is yes, we can certainly consider a process if there was a well thought out proposal to do additional works, something like a garden bed to add to the entranceway or entrance to our communities, then yes, we can support that.
Thank you. I'll take it back to the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair. Yes, I noticed that there is a Matchbox Film Company hanging around town at the moment, and I'd just like to say that I had involvement with the past production of Sea Patrol when I was fortunate enough to have worked on the set as a set nurse for quite a few seasons, and I'd just like to say that this is a very positive thing in my eyes, that the productions do bring a lot of economic benefit to our areas, so I'll be happy to see all this happening in the near future.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Any further general business? Councillor Baines.
Good news piece. That was really well caught there. Thank you, Mr Chair. Good news piece. There has been a lot of angst around the boat ramp work at the Coconuts that was performed with a contractor under a DTMR contract. I am happy to say that the boat ramp is up and operational. The works that have been done by the contractor under DTMR are just excellent. So when the weather comes good and you want to get your boat out, the Coconut boat ramps is back operational and running again. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further general business? Couple of things. The fortnightly update of CMCA, Hadwell Park. That was tallied up yesterday by our staff, $7,018, and the previous fortnight tally was $5,597. So to the people in the community who said that grey nomads don't spend in our economy, there's the evidence. So that's only CMCA, that's not the River Drive Council Park, which is chock-a-block at the moment. We're not tallying there, but certainly the grey nomads are contributing to our community.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor.
Thank you for,
Sorry.
Councillor Tui.
Yeah, and obviously, thank you, Mr Mayor, that's great. And I'm assuming that would not be everybody. Not everybody's
No.
putting receipts in, so there's even more to add to that tally. So
Yeah,
thank you.
Good point, Councillor Tui. If you go, and they do, they go to Paranella Park and Mamu Kenepi Walk, you don't get a paper receipt there, so they don't get popped in the box. Brothers are picking them up with a courtesy bus, take them down for dinner, lunch. They don't bring back receipts and fob them in. The pizza man delivers to the CMCA park. Those receipts don't. So there's a lot of areas that don't get captured, but certainly that's just an example of the spend that is occurring, which is great for our economy. Thank you for the introduction on Matchbox. I do have a breaking news item, and here we go. It's long-winded, so bear with me. Our council staff have been working behind the scenes with the proponents of a media project for some time now, but have been bound by agreements to remain confidential. I am very pleased to publicly announce today that production of a 10-part TV series, Irreverent, is about to commence in our region. Matchbox is a prolific film and television production company with offices in Sydney, Adelaide, Melbourne, Australia. It makes world-class content for global audience. Its credits include leading international adult dramas Stateless, The Heights, Glitch, Safe Harbour, 7 Types of Ambiguity, Secret City, Wanted, The Slap, and children's dramas Nowhere Boys and Mustangs FC. Matchbox is also currently in production of a new 8-part drama, Clickbait, for Netflix. The company is one of the most credentialed and awarded producers in Australia. It has won international Emmys, Prix du Jour, a BAFTA, and multiple AACTA, that's the Australian Academy of Cinema and Television Art Awards, and Logies. And NBCU Universal International Studios company, Matchbox has produced more than 50 titles, working in every network in Australia and various international buyers and commissioners. Universal Studio Group, which comprises Universal Television, Universal Content Productions, and NBC Universal International Studios, will bring 3 productions to Queensland: Young Rock, currently in production in southeast Queensland, Joe Exotic, and Irrelevant. Leveraging its local expertise and infrastructure, Matchbox Pictures will lead and oversee these 3 projects on the ground. Irrelevant is a 10-part TV series that centres around a Chicago criminal who is forced to assume the identity of a church reverend in a tropical Australian beach town in order to stay hidden and stay alive. While it becomes clear to the town that he's got some unusual ways, the fake reverend manages to bumble through weddings, funerals, and everything else that's thrown at him as he tries to maintain his cover. In time, he manages to capture the heart of the town, just as the town captured his heart. Irrelevant is ultimately a show that about the power of community and the hope that it can bring to us all. After many location surveys around far north Queensland, Mission Beach was chosen for a number of reasons. The natural beauty of the place and is the obvious reason. Some of the crew have fond memories of how Mission Beach community welcomed the production during Hal and Di McElroy's Sea Patrol. Other smaller productions have filmed in the region the past couple of years. The production will provide invaluable opportunities for Australian cast and crew, in addition to opportunities in other industry sectors such as post-production, digital and visual effects business, engagement of workers in construction, transport, accommodation and hospitality, and opportunity in training crews. Sourcing of cast and crew housing and accommodation has commenced, and many properties already booked for the coming months. Working 5-day week, crew will have some downtime to take advantage of the fantastic tourism activities in our region. As it is reasonably long shoot, a lot of the crew have already made plans for their families to come with them. Local businesses in the region will benefit, and the number of people in town accessing and patronising restaurants, service stations, supermarkets, hardware stores, to name a few. Some of the proposed areas of filming may limit access and amenity to the general public and locals alike. However, these measures are temporarily in nature, and any areas assessed will be restored at completion of filming. If the series is successful, it is hoped the production will come back to the region annually to film additional series. With the current COVID restrictions, this is a great opportunity to showcase Cashery Coast to national and international viewers and producers alike, and as a location offering fantastic locations to equal anywhere in the world, but with the added benefit of a film-friendly and proactive region. When appropriate, the production has committed to hosting small groups of school students studying media and arts to watch proceedings. Matchbox has committed to keeping the community informed at all times, particularly when they are planned road closures, night filming or special effect, and minimising disruption to the community wherever possible. Preliminary crew will start arriving in Mission Beach mid-July, with the main crew arriving last week of August and in town until mid-November. It is anticipated that towards the middle end of each week, plans and drawings will be formally submitted to Council. Art Department with construction arriving 19th of July, and work will commence measuring up and construction of the set build location as early as the 26th of July. An Art Department construction space has been rented, and a lot of initial prefab construction will start there first. Part of the production's requirements involve filming on public land. Matchbox has proposed they undertake community notification in conjunction with advice from Council via public notices and social media to officially inform them of the production activities. I move, therefore, 1, that Council welcomes the cast and crew of Revenant to our community, and we look forward to the many benefits that this project will deliver to our region in the short, medium and long term. 2, that Council actively encourages residents of the Cashery Coast to welcome the cast and crew of Revenant to our community. 3, that Council facilitates the filming of this TV series as required on public land, subject to appropriate community notification by Matchbox, and appropriate effort is applied in reducing the impact to the community. So moved. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Barnes. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, yeah. Again, myself and Jeff Councillor Baines was also involved in production of Sea Patrol when it was here, and the economic benefits to the local businesses and stuff was really outstanding, I can say. Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Baines.
Probably another great point to follow on through, thank you, Mr. Chair, that Councillor Millwood mentioned is the producers and line producers are experienced in our area. Initially, when Sea Patrol first kicked off, they didn't really have much of an idea of the capability of a lot of our businesses and engineering groups and suppliers within the region. They are well aware of those connections now, so I think any new businesses that have kicked up that may be able to assist in the production of equipment or any of the things that the crews need, maybe, I don't know if they get in contact with the production company directly and let them know what they do, because again, Cashery Coast, the heart of the wet tropics, the birthplace of the Great Barrier Reef, and we're the centre of the universe. We can produce anything here, and the film industry should be using the people that are here locally, and they do appreciate that already, Mr. Mayor. So the economic benefit is just can go beyond your imagination. It's huge.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Further to that, we are COVID-free, and clearly the film industry is looking at this area. The recent purchaser of Dunk Island has made it very clear to the CEO and I in our conversations that his vision will be for Dunk Island will be measured by what the community wants, and we made it clear we want local jobs for our kids. So further than hospitality, further than tourism, Mark Spillane has a vision of a film hub on Dunk Island. Fits in hand in glove with what we just read out. So it's all happening in Cashery Coast. One coast, Cashery Coast. Any further comments on that wonderful news? Mr. CEO.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just to recognise the efforts of Mr. The efforts and contribution of Mr. Goodman behind the scenes, if you'll pardon the rather obvious pun, in working with the company to get to this point.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. We got the good news from Mr. Goodman while we were having lunch at Bang and Grind yesterday, and I just put that out there. That's where we were. Okay. Any further general business? Oh, we got the mover? Yes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And I concur with the CEO. Thank you to the staff who've done a great job behind the scenes pulling this off, and it's going to be wonderful for our economy and our young kids wanting jobs, no doubt about it. Mr. CEO, yep. We now go into confidential and general business. No? Yep. You want to?
Sorry, I do beg your pardon,
yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
We now go into confidential and general business, so the CEO can give everybody a briefing on what happened with Department of State Development and Queensland Treasury yesterday, and then we'll come out of confidential and I'll read the prepared statement that's been forwarded to us by the government. Would somebody...
Sorry. Before you step off, Mr. Chairman, we do this piece as isolated from the next confidential piece?
It's a general business
Do them
piece.
separate.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine.
So the reason we're going in, the reason we're closing the meeting to the public is to discuss the confidential details of yesterday's meeting with the state government, and we'll come out. I'll read the prepared statement, and then we will go back into camera or close the meeting to the public to discuss two other confidential items.
And through
somebody...
you, Mr. Chairman, the reason that Council may deal with this on a confidential basis is firstly because of the commercial in confidence nature of the negotiations and the pursuant legal instruments that will be negotiated. So there's provision under our legislation for Council to make that decision.
Would somebody move that we close the meeting to the public? Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Okay, councillors, would somebody move that we reopen the meeting to the public? Moved by councillor Pervin, seconded by councillor Chewy. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. I'll just hand over to CEO to do a briefing before I read out this prepared statement from the state government.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And with your permission, councillors, the Mayor and I met with senior staff, very senior staff from a number of state government departments yesterday, together with the member for Hinchinbrook, Mr. Nick DeMeadow. Our discussions were based on a without prejudice, based on a without prejudice agreement, which was honoured, and in the closed section, I believe that between the Mayor and myself, the councillors have sufficient information so that they can reasonably assess the message that the Mayor is about to deliver in a moment. And through you, Mr. Chairman, I would ask the councillors if they don't believe they've been sufficiently apprised of information, then please say so now and we can remedy that. I'm taking that as a no. Through you, Mr. Chairman, it was also impressed upon the councillors and the staff that the details of the discussion and the negotiations that were held yesterday are highly confidential and will not go beyond the bounds of the discussion which Council had just a moment ago. So on that note, Mr. Chairman, I invite you to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. CEO, for that introduction. This week, representatives of the Cassowary Coast Regional Council met with the state local member Nick DeMeadow and representatives of the Queensland Government to discuss the way forward in resolving the Port Hinchinbrook matters. The meeting was very productive, with all parties coming to an in-principle agreement to immediately start working together to resolve these matters, which will lead to the normalisation of the Port Hinchinbrook development. As part of the meeting, there was a focus on the principles of simplicity, timeliness, risk management, and for the work the council and state would do over the coming weeks. It was acknowledged that given the longevity and complexity of this matter, that a staged but timely approach to issue resolution was important. The most pressing issue requiring resolution to get to the normalisation of land assets, and in particular the sewage treatment plant. The importance of normalising the Port Hinchinbrook development is that in doing so, it unlocks a new opportunity for the Cassowary Coast. This is a positive step forward for the local communities of the Cassowary Coast. That was prepared by the state government, as agreed in our meeting yesterday, one source of truth, and that's how we'll proceed going forward. Given that, councillors, I move that councillors formally endorse... Sorry?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm terribly sorry. Please forgive me for interrupting, but I wanted to emphasise that what you just said referred to the land, the normalisation of land assets. So this in-principle agreement is absent of any reference to 1 Mile Creek or the potential dredging of same. What we're talking about here is the land assets. So it's a key word in what you just said, if you don't mind.
Thank you for the clarification on that, Mr. CEO. Councillors, I move councillors formally endorse the without prejudice support for the in-principle agreement on Port Hinchinbrook development. Seconded by Councillor Barnes. Any questions or comments, councillors? All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We now go to the formal confidential part of the agenda. Item 6, we have 6.1, page 73, Regional Bitumen Reseal Program, and 6.2, page 78, the water concession request. We will be going into confidential now to address those two matters. Would somebody move that we close the meeting to the public? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, would somebody move that we reopen the meeting to the public? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.1, page 73, Regional Bitumen Reseal Program, and Ms Perini will present this report. Morning.
Morning. Through the chair. This report relates to Council's annual bitumen reseal program. We undertake a regional bitumen seal programs in order to maintain the road network. So this is a collective arrangement through the FNQ ROC, and they were tasked with inviting tenders for this program. 5 tenders were received, and the recommendation through the evaluation was to engage RPQ Spray Seal, who undertook last year's reseal program for council. So recommendation is that council varies the existing contract for the regional bitumen reseal program with RPQ Spray Seal and conclude this year's program on the basis of the indicated program of works. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Perini. Any questions or comments? Councillor Milford.
Through the chair. So, Ms Perini, this RPQ spray seal did a good job last time. I would think that we had no issues with that.
Yep. Through the chair, we had no issues with the contractor previously. Their performance and the way they executed their contract was all good.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Perini. Item 6.2, page 78, water concession request, and Mr Smart will present this report. Morning, Mr Smart.
Morning, councillors. Councillors, this item relates to a water concession for a property at Pigeon Hill. This particular property has previously had a concession awarded to it on the basis that there appears to have been some evidence that a failing pressure reducing valve that council operates may not have been functioning correctly, and the property may have been seeing higher than desirable pressure at the water meter. Unfortunately, when the previous concession was granted, I wasn't aware that there had been a failure in the following rating period, and after the owner received that bill, they made application for a further concession. It's acknowledged that the repair work was undertaken to our PRV after the leak, so there are grounds, I believe, for this concession, and I'd be recommending that we replace the charge for the period the 2nd of the 6th 2020 to 1st of the 12th 2020 with a charge of $205.75 in lieu of what was initially rated.
Thank you, Mr Smart. Any questions or comments for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings the meeting to a close at 11:20. Thanks, everybody.